This is the BBC.
This podcast is supported by advertising outside the UK.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hi, I'm Nihal. Welcome to Headliners, the podcast that brings you interviews with the biggest names in entertainment, culture and the arts. I'm very happy to say that Mark still joins us now. Hello, Mark.
Hello, Hal. Lovely to be here.
It's lovely
and can I
to
just,
see you.
before anything else, jump
Yeah.
to your defence?
Yes.
When you're asked the question, as you heard before the news, are you familiar with Section 75? You really shouldn't be familiar with Section 75. If you are, and you were furnished with all the information for which you could have got that £10 back, I would have thought less of you as a human being.
The thing is, I am convinced, Mark, that from doing that question every week, and you heard the score, 21 wrong, 7 right, that I am now the target of scammers who think, this geezer, let's get hold of his number. We're going to take him to the cleaners.
Yeah.
We're going to rinse him right out.
Yeah, we can even do it legally because he's got no idea how Section 75 works.
No, I would have thought Section 75 was something quite criminal, right? Anything with the word section on it, you don't think, that's...
I better make myself familiar with that, just in case I end up buying a cabinet £10 on a credit card and £80 on a debit card, and then the place goes bust. You know, it's better to be safe than sorry. It's sort of that's lovely that Martin Lewis is so familiar with, of course,
He's
that's
amazing,
his job.
yeah.
But it's a wonder. It reminded me, the sort of how some people are they can't believe that you don't understand certain things. The very wonderful Paul Sinner, the quizzer.
Yes.
The Chase is a
Very
splendid
bright man,
chap.
yes.
Yeah, and I was lucky enough to be at his wedding, and of course there were lots of quizzy people there. And I was at the bar sort of chatting to one of them, and we were talking about how it's very much like sport, he said. Some days you're good and other days you're a bit off form. And this quizzer, in all seriousness, no irony, he said, I'll be honest with you, Mark, some days I'm so off form that I couldn't even tell you the atomic number for cesium. And
Wow.
to him, of course, that was like, how can he be that bad? But
how did you respond to that? Did you go, really?
No, I did confess that even on a good day, I'd struggle with that particular number.
Okay, so if there is something that you are geeky about, what would it be?
Sport and music, really.
Right, so
Terribly
Crystal Palace or all football?
Oh, all sorts of... No, everything. I could reel off all the snooker finalists since 1977, all that sort of rubbish. Yeah, I'm not proud of that.
Okay, so the pub quiz team, you play what role in the pub quiz team?
Oh, I don't do them. I don't really do all those.
But what would you? If you're bringing in a ringer, if you knew Mark Steele was in town...
I think lists...
Because you have been in many towns.
Yeah, I think lists I'm sort of quite good at. Like, I could probably tell you every country in the world and stuff like that. I'm not saying that to boast. I'm saying that with the same level of shame as if I'd been found, naked in the town square. I'm really sorry.
It's fascinating. I loved listening to this book because you could be around a house and listening to your life unfold around me. I tell you what, if people develop a time machine in the future, but before that, or just before that, they listen to this audiobook, they ain't going back to the 1970s. This is not an advert for the 1970s, is it, Mark?
It's not. Although, like all of these times, you sort of enjoy it at the time at one level. I think in particular it was difficult for me because I was in a town that where people are brilliant. I can't sort of say Swanley is the one different. I'm very lucky. My job, a big part of my job the last 10 years has been going around towns for the In Town series. And everywhere you go, you find there are people who are just so compassionate and hilarious and full of empathy and funny. And Swanley's got that as well. But it wasn't an easy place to be a teenager, really. And little did I know, I knew I was adopted. All I knew about being adopted, and I had very little interest in it, was my mum had parents who were really strict. So when she was young and pregnant, she was told to give me up. All of that, well, a lot of that turned out not to be the case. And also, your father, because my aunt, sort of the person who I knew as my aunt, who was a delightful woman, she facilitated the adoption because the pregnant woman, my natural mother, lived next door to her, and they got chatting, and so I was sort of passed into the fold of Swanley, and my natural mother said to me, "Oh yes, your natural father was French. I'm sure she said he was French," and I say in the book, sometimes I'd say that to people, and they'd say things like, "Oh, well, that explains why you like cheese," and stuff like that. And that was about it, really. I had no more interest in that. And then, this sounds so cheesy, if you give the pun, but when my son was born, it occurred to me, I thought, oh, yeah, she probably does remember me, because when you have a child, it's quite a big thing in your life, isn't it? I know that sounds ridiculous, but you don't realise, just how big a thing it is having kids till you have them, do you? And you think, and I thought, oh, she will remember me. Up until then, I thought, oh, she won't remember me after all this time. We only met a few days. But, of course, then I thought, no, she really will be wondering where I am. So I sort of tried to pursue her a little bit. And then the fun started.
How do you think your parents achieved, not your biological ones, but your parents, your mum and dad, achieved this kind of confidence that they gave you that meant that some of the issues that people have when they're adopted didn't really become part of your life?
Well, the big thing, I think, is just to be honest. I think that's, I don't think this book is, God forbid that anybody comes to me for advice on anything, really. But I think just be honest. So my mum, there was never a big moment, that you sort of see in the plays or in soap operas, a big moment where the kid's 5 or something and they're sat down and the parents say, now then, there's something very important that we want to tell you because you were special, you were chosen specially. You're not like the other boys and girls whose parents have no choice but to keep them, even if they can't stand them. You were chosen specially. There was never any of that. I don't remember not knowing that I was adopted. I knew when I was adopted even before I knew where babies came from, which is peculiar when you think about it. And so it was just never an issue. So I would say I think the people who are in a state about it, usually it's when at the age of 18 they suddenly discover that, Mr. Tompkins, who runs the greengrocers, is their dad, then that's bad. That must, you'd never believe anyone after that, I would think. But I never really had an issue with it, and as a result, I can't stand filling in forms. I wouldn't have even if I knew Section 75, I wouldn't fill in that form for the tenner, and so I think there was probably a part of me that thought, oh, I can't go through all the bureaucracy and administration involved in finding out who this woman was who clearly didn't want me. But anyway, in the end, of course, that turned out to be very, very unfair on her. And I now, as I'm sure we'll come on to, the truth of it, which was just ridiculous. I wish I'd pursued it earlier. Again, being honest and not secret is pretty much the key to these things, really. I should be Prime Minister, shouldn't I?
There ain't no party like a Number 10 party. In fact, there is no party at Number 10. There you go. I should remix that song. Okay, so tell us how, when looking back, you discover more about yourself. Because, interestingly, you make this long list, a litany of violent escapades or violence... or examples of violence that the 70s just considered to be normal. Yeah,
exactly. It was like that. I mean, if anyone remembers it, I think, I don't know, let's just take any random example. The football, for example. I mean, I used to sort of go to football matches when I was about 15. I don't know, it must have been very cheap in them days. And you'd stand in it, I'm absolutely awful at violence. And so I would just move away from it. But there would just be a squabble. And sometimes you'd I'd sort of move away from it. I think I say in the book, a bit like if a particularly angry cow had wandered onto the terraces, you think, I'd probably better keep away from that. And this great big fight would be going on sort of 20 yards away. And it was just seemed to be like that. Or in in school. I wasn't bullied now. I was never the one that was bullied. I just had normal. But I would say probably on average once every 3 days going into a lesson, someone would just go, "Oi, steal," and I'd turn around and then poof. And that was just accepted. And if you sat there sort of whinging about it during the lesson, the teacher would be, "Oi, nobody cares that your nose is bleeding still. Pay attention." That was sort of...
Yes.
That was sort of what it was like. I'm not trying to be... but where I'm really not like these people who go, and it didn't do me any harm. It did do me harm because it hurt. And I think those days really shouldn't be revisited.
I was particularly impressed at the way you were able to describe most eloquently the rules for Bulldog.
Oh, British Bulldog.
Yes.
Yeah. This was...
So let's talk about this, because people don't have this, I don't think, anymore. I don't think this is allowed anymore. But let's talk about this game, because I can't remember the rules. I just remember it being quite a bit of a tear-up, really, to be honest.
British Bulldog, which was played certainly at the Scouts. Were you ever in the Scouts?
No. This was just a normal playground thing at my primary school, yeah.
So you would get, I think, in general, I'm sure there'd be sort of regional modifications, as there is with pool or any other game. But you would generally have 3 people who would be chosen, and they would be in the middle, and maybe 25 other... There was always boys in those days. I suppose these days there's probably a Women's British Bulldog Foundation. I don't know.
I hope so.
But it would be boys, and all the others would have to stand at one end of the room, the playground or whatever, and they would simply have to cross from one side to the other without being picked up by one of the boys in the middle. And if you were one of the boys in the middle, you had to catch someone, lift them off the ground for the count of 3, or to shout British Bulldog 1, 2, 3. And if you did that, they then joined you in the middle. And so as the game went on, there would be more people in the middle. And at the end, there'd just be 2 or 3 kids just trying to evade everybody. And that was it. That was all. There are more rules in the violent bits of the Squid Game than there was in this. In fact, if there's a British Squid Game, this is going to be in it, isn't it? It was just... so horrible. But and when people were injured, that was just considered good. You were well done. In fact, I used to do a bit in my act about this. You might remember this, about rugby, playing rugby. I was never particularly a rugby player, but we did rugby at school. And there was one day we all had to stand in a line, and half of us stood in a line, and another half had to sort of were opposite. So each boy had one boy facing them.
Yeah. And
there was Mr. Barnes, he was from Manchester, and he used to say, "Hands were made for rugby," was his little catchphrase.
Brilliant catchphrase.
He said, and the idea of this game was the kid with the ball had to run at the kid without the ball, and then he said, "And you without the ball, you got to do whatever you can to stop him. I don't care what it is, just make sure he don't get past you." And so the kid with the ball, they all just ran past, and we all just watched them. And he went absolutely nuts, and he said, "You got to do it properly this time." And so this time, as the boy coming running past me sort of got about level with me, I just, I don't know what to do. And I sort of poked a finger out and caught him in the eye. And this kid went on the floor and he was yelling. And Barnes came over and put his arm round me and went, "Well done, Steele! Brilliant! What, Steele? He knows how to do it. The kid's in agony. Brilliant lad!"
That was the 70s.
That was the 70s.
That was 70s. Also, you talk about the a gaggle, a throng of people who you can't avoid.
Yeah.
And I just wonder, I don't wish to trigger you in any way, but if I was to shout "bundle" at the top of my voice, would this have any ramifications?
Yeah, bundle.
Yeah.
That was, you would just hear this one word, bundle. And then this was, I think I describe it in the thing as like a swarm of bees that was just there in your life all day. This massive bees. And you just had to keep a bit of an eye on them. You'd just be, a bit like, imagine if there were dragons lived in the town centre, and when you went shopping, you just make sure you keep an eye on the dragon, and then if it decided it was your turn to be bundled, then they would just come over and go and bundle, and they would just all be on top of you. It was astonishing how there weren't 200 or 300 deaths a day at my school.
It was amazing. I just wonder if we all had more flexible bones then.
We must have been. Well, there would be people who'd say that now, wouldn't there? Be see, and the thing is, you grew up with flexible bones, so it did you good. Not like these mollycoddle days where you're not even allowed to attack someone with an axe without somebody complaining about health and safety.
Ant has just tweeted me to say they play bulldog at my son's school, so it's still a thing. That's amazing.
Oh, no. Where is this?
It seemed to be a way, though, for certain kids to pay back. It was a way that they could kind of do organised bullying. So they would just launch you up and then land you in it because they were taking out something. They knew that they couldn't necessarily walk up to you and punch you in the face in the playground. But if you're playing bulldog,
yes, I suppose so. Yeah,
this was a way of kind of getting back.
Well, I wonder if maybe it'll be introduced into the Olympics at some point.
Fingers crossed.
Swanley will be an independent country and it'll be top of the medal table.
1973, Mark.
Yes.
Let's talk about 1973 as a pivotal year.
Okay.
Strikes.
Yeah.
Your when politics first came into your life. I mean, you talk in the audiobook about how people going on strike, and you were trying to understand, well, why would you do that? Right? Like if people were giving you a chance not to work, why would you go?
Well,
like
I think
you were using the school comparison here, weren't you?
Yes. Well, in particular, there was, because there was a lot of places would be shut down. And then there was a tactic of the unions at the time would be to, they would call it an occupation. So most famously, there was a shipyard in Glasgow and it was shut down. And so all the shipyard workers sort of moved in there and they said, we're not allowing you to shut it down. Yeah, and I remember being at school and thinking, are you mad? If someone shut the school down and said we couldn't go anymore, that would be magnificent. But yeah, of course it wasn't like that because they were depending on it for work. So, yes, and I think it was a very political time.
Yes. Oil prices. That was one thing.
That's right. Yeah. Well, they
impacted.
the oil prices and so on, and so there was and then there was a bit like we've had recently. There was a lot of people went berserk and went queuing up for petrol and all that sort of thing. And then there was a limit brought into how fast you could go that was much more stringent than normally. And it was the sort of first time that I'd noticed that the news could actually have an effect on you. Up until then, I'd thought the news was just something that happened to other people. We'd sort of it be on in the background, and my mum and dad never really had a great deal of interest in it. And sometimes they go, "Oh, isn't it terrible what's going on in whatever bit of the world was on?" But suddenly now the news became about us, and also unemployment started going up, and you sort of know people such and such is out of work, and so it sort of became a little bit different. And then I became, by the time I was sort of a few years after that, I become quite an angry little militant person.
A number of people, by the way, you are bringing back some fantastic memories. Rob Gill's just tweeted, great discussion on 5 Live, Mark Steele, and what happened at school if someone shouted bundle, the very definition of adrenaline in the 1980s,
yeah.
He said. Mark Steele, bulldog. The other thing was building camps, usually of corrugated metal sheets. Then one lad volunteered to get inside while the rest of us hurled bricks at this shelter. Patrick, I'm not sure Swanley went there. Did Swanley take it there?
Probably did, yeah. If you built a shelter, I expect someone would... Yeah, thank God no one... Thank God Swanley has never acquired nuclear missiles.
Jay has tweeted us, Mark, to say, I broke my arm in junior school playing British Bulldog. I'd made it all the way through the mass of classmates trying to floor me, only to trip and fall into the wall of the canteen whilst doing my victory dance.
Oh, tragedy. That's like winning the World Cup and then falling down the stairs with it, denting it and being charged and not being able to get the money back because you're not familiar with Section 75.
If you were to have a definition of what a 70s dad should be, and by definition I mean a stereotypical definition, how much of that would apply to your dad?
Well, my dad was absolutely absolutely perfect. He was. Let me think of one example. I mean, he was just well, obviously the jokes. I mean, dad jokes has become a thing, isn't it? That people say, but he was that. His joke would be, Dad, can I have a Milky Way? You'll need to go into space. That sort of thing. So he was very much like that. He would go down to he'd go and play snooker once a week. He would go and he took me to the cricket, which I'm very grateful for.
Yes,
that's one of my great loves. And so he would take me there, and then he'd disappear because he'd find the beer tent, and he'd sort of leave me there for hours. He'd come back absolutely steaming, and then he'd drive me home. And
classic 70s behaviour.
Classic 70s behaviour. Yeah, and and he'd have no idea what's going on. Are they still playing? What's the matter with it? Oh God, I'll tell you what. I don't think I've put this in the book, but I'll tell you this is. So Kent were playing Surrey in the semi-final of a big game at the Oval. And I'd started work now. And I said, right, I'm going to get there after work. It wasn't quite so formal as it is now. You could sort of just get there. So I was working quite near the Oval. And I went down and I met him there. And he was completely drunk, absolutely drunk. And there was a man who was adjudicating the Man of the Match award, called Gary Sobers, who, if anyone knows anything about cricket, you'll know this.
Sobers, come on, 6 sixes.
Yeah. I mean, quite possibly the greatest cricketer of the last, certainly a contender for the greatest cricketer he certainly was the greatest cricketer at the time, had been in the world. And he was adjudicating the Man of the Match. And he gave the Man of the Match to someone who my dad didn't think should get Man of the Match. And at the end of the game, Gary Sobers was signing autographs at the gate, and my dad just went straight up to him and went, "What is the matter with you with the Man of the Match? He's an idiot." And I was, Dad, and I have this memory of Gary Sobers just being so brilliant, just going, "Well, the marvellous thing about cricket is we can all have different opinions, isn't it? Yeah, but your opinions, and then words I can't say. Doesn't matter with you." And it was so embarrassing. And if you could think of nothing could be more embarrassing than that. The thing he did more embarrassing than that, the only thing that it could have been, he did. He then charged off and went hammering through this sort of doors past some old bloke who was sort of the steward. And I was going, "Where are you going?" And one or two people would go, "Excuse me, you can't go there." And he said, "I want to congratulate the Kent team for winning." And he went charging round this little labyrinth of corridors. And I thought, what are we doing? He was so drunk. And then we went into a room that was the Kent changing room. And we were I know if I was listening to this, I'd think, oh, he's making that up. But I'm honestly not. And then we were in the Kent changing room, and there was all these sort of Kent players stood around with a towel round them, wondering what on earth this bloke was doing. Go, "Well done, boys." He was like that.
Well, he is. I often speak to people who've had, parents or grandparents who were in the wars, right? And they say, oh, they never spoke about it. And, maybe later on in their life, it was very difficult for them. Your dad's experience was, should we say, he wasn't going to make any World War II movie anytime soon, was it? Unless it was a carry-on film, presumably.
Well, this was the thing.
The Gibraltar experience sounds...
quite until recently, because, yes, it was a lot of it being brought up at that time was about being... we were in the war. Now, of course, there are very, very many people in this country who went to war and they were in D-Day or in something terrible at Arnhem or whatever, or they were captured by the Japanese or something, or their house was demolished by the Luftwaffe or something. Yeah. But there were also, I think we're quite unique in that there were people who could enjoy the war. And I'm not to downplay all these other things, but that was the case. And I think, my dad just thought it was a marvellous time. He wanted me to go in the Navy. I had a marvellous time in the Navy, went to Gibraltar, swam in the Mediterranean, see the world, saw the Rock. All this. I know that was my image of him. Sort of was chasing girls around the beach of Gibraltar and so on. Now, in the end, I found out that wasn't entirely the case, as as most of this story. All of this I've said up to now all turns out to be sort of the inverse of it. Really, is what then becomes. I don't know. Then makes it a story. I think that's possibly different from other people's.
Well, we will get into that story, Mark Steele, because there is lots more to talk about with you, my good man. So please do stay with us here, BBC Radio 5 Live. People are still messaging me about these things. Apparently, it was called a Pyleon round our way.
Oh, right.
Yeah, it wasn't a bundle. I'm just, I'm still thinking about that, the word bundle. It's making me shiver.
You didn't have a bundle then?
Oh, bundle was a big thing.
Right.
But we also had, because in old money, I think was it year 10 and 11 or something.
Right.
Now we year 4.
Yeah. When
you
15.
got to 5th year, and then we didn't have a college at our school, a sixth form, so we'd then go off at 16. But the 4th and 5th year fights, that was an annual thing.
Yeah. Oh, was it?
Yeah, the 4th years and the 5th years had to have a tear up.
Right.
That was just normal.
Yeah.
It was a very bizarre...
An annual tradition, and if it was cancelled, it'd be a bit like last year, for the
they
first
wouldn't
time
have
since
cancelled.
1873.
Yeah. We're not letting the pandemic... We're going to Harlow Town Park, and we're having a tear-up. We're not going to let a pandemic stop us from having a tear-up.
Well, it was just the normality of this that I think is so hard to convey to people who are maybe, not of our age.
But in a much darker way... something else you say in the book about women sitting around and considering it a badge of honour that their husband doesn't raise a hand to them.
Yeah, it's extraordinary. And again, this is just obviously a specific sort of violence. Yeah, that would be a compliment. I'll tell you one thing for our Ted, he's never laid a hand on me. That's unbelievable, isn't it?
Yeah.
That was that. Oh no, so he's good then that he hasn't been.
That's bizarre.
Violent. That's so horrible.
Yeah.
And up until sort of, but that does sort of, I think, then give some sort of indication as to why what happened to my natural mother happened, because that could only have happened if there was a sort of certain view of what the status of women was, really.
Who Do I Think I Am by Mark Steele is available on Audible now, a memoir. How was it doing this, recording your life? Like this?
Well, I mean, because it's not about my life really. It's about the business of finding out who my original parents were, and I hope that I've sort of written it in a way that is interesting for people who aren't me. Because if it was just about me, I think, so I think, for example, we were talking about violence in the 1970s, from the listeners' reactions, for example, I think that would be like, oh, right, yes, that reminds me of that. Or if you're young, you're lucky enough to have avoided that. That's sort of interesting because you can't believe that life was like that not very long ago. And I think similarly, so for example, when I found out who my natural parents were, but it was just each of them had a story which I had to uncover because I've never really, apart from once, got to meet either of them. So I had to sort of uncover their story. So it became almost as if I was doing it about someone else, almost as if I was investigating someone else's life. And every now and again I'd think, oh, right, this is about me, isn't it? I don't and it's happened again, I noticed, but when I did this as a live show for a little bit, some people would say, oh, it's very brave. And I used to say, brave? Like, did you come on the night I was on stage with a leopard? It wasn't that brave. It's finding out about what happened. I don't think I felt personally affected by it all that much. Not it's not one of those sorts of books where there's a lot of crying.
Yeah. Well then, are you changed by what you discovered at all?
Yes, definitely. One of the things that has changed me, and one of the things that I've changed my mind about, is that when I was sort of up until up until the point in which I discovered them, I really believed that we are creatures who are what we've become since we were born. Our environment dictated who we are, and that's just become not tenable. I think I'm a living experiment in a way of that. I mean, can I go on to say about
it's up to you. It's up to you. It's your audio book, so it's up to you.
I mean, I do say it in that. So, well, I sort of it took me ages and ages to find them, and
with help as well.
With help, with all sorts of help, and eventually a really, really sort of marvellous woman who was magnificently efficient. She said, "Oh, we've got all sorts of information here. Don't you worry. I think we can be able to find them." And she was marvellously. I think I'm going to leave no stone unturned, Mark. I'll find her. I'll locate her, and it took her exactly 2 weeks. And she found out my natural mother lived in Rimini in Italy.
Yeah.
And so we wrote a letter, which is the protocol these days. She wrote a letter to my natural mother in Rimini, who didn't reply. So months went by, and then she said, right, well, don't worry, Mark, there's a sort of etiquette to this sort of business, so I'm going to contact her again tomorrow morning. I've got a phone number for her, and we'll jolly well see what she's got to say for herself. And she then reported back this phone call, and the phone call went, this is pretty much word for word. She said, she was terribly upset, Mark. She was terribly upset that we got in touch with her at all. And she said, you don't realise it was a long time ago. And I absolutely promised that that we weren't judging her in any way whatsoever. And she said, I felt rather like one of these people whose job it is to speak to people who's taken everybody hostage on an aeroplane. I just thought, keep her talking. That's the main thing before she put the phone down. She said, and then eventually she asked 3 questions. And I thought, what? This is bizarre. She said the 3 questions she asked.
The third question's particularly bizarre.
Extraordinary, yes. She said, well, does he have any children of his own? And I said, yes, he does. He has a boy and he has a girl. Then she asked what's his job? And I said, well, he's a comedian. And then she asked the third question. She said, I have to tell you, Mark, in all the years I've been doing this job, not once have I ever been asked this conundrum by anybody. She asked, what are his politics? And I thought, what? And she said, I've never had. This is a woman who deals with this all the time. Of course, not, is he all right? Not what's his health? Not what is he, nothing. Are his kids all right? What are his politics? And eventually, of course, when I found out more about her, then that made sense because she was someone, well, I went to Rimini. She had died by the time I got to Rimini. And I met with a absolutely delightful woman who was one of her closest friends. And we went round Italy. We went round Rimini meeting all these people. She was clearly the sort of queen of this area, my natural mother, in Rimini. And she really liked to drink. And so everywhere we went, there was a bar somewhere. And she never told anybody that she'd had a baby and given it away. She'd kept that completely quiet all of her life. And so now all these people were finding out that she'd had a baby, and it was me. I would sort of go around. We went through this process dozens of times. This lovely woman who was a friend of hers would sort of walk with me along a bit of Rimini, and then she'd say, she had beautifully as well, she spoke just a bit of English, and she'd say, we go to the shop, and we'd go into this little shop, and then they'd talk away in Italian, and clearly it got to the point where she would say, this is France's son, that we never knew about, and there'd be a gasp, and then this woman would turn to me and say, he say you got her eyes. You have France's eyes. Frances was my natural mother's name. And then they would tell me that she was always really the most lively person in the street, that she would always be the one in the bar that would start the singing. She would then have a massive political row about something or other. It didn't really matter what. She just loved having a row. And and then 2 or 3 times, people would describe the sort of politics that she would espouse. She would say, France is very comunisto.
Wow.
And now, my mum and dad never really expressed any political views at all about anything very much, never really had very much interest in music. It wasn't their thing. That's a catchy tune about tie a yellow ribbon or something, but that's about it. Whereas I've always been obsessed with music. And so all of these bits of behaviour that were like, I'm not just talking about, like she liked marmalade and so do I. I mean, really quite fundamental things. The other extraordinary thing And I will. There is something I want to come on to say about the natural mum and how she came to have me. But the only other thing she said after saying what are his politics, the only other thing she said before putting the phone down was, "Let me tell you the name of the father."
Yes.
So she then revealed the name of my father, which I never. I mean, I say in the show at the moment at which I was listening to this because I thought he was French, and I was thinking, "Oh God, I bet it's de Gaulle or something." But it turned out. It turned out.
Could be worse.
I just thought it was a random Frenchman who seduced her at the time, in the way that we're led to believe French men can. But it turned out that this man, after a little bit of investigating, was a multi-millionaire Wall Street trader who had been world backgammon champion and was a prominent figure of the Claremont Club, which is the group of people who played in a gambling club in the 1970s, set up by John Aspinall, along with people such as David Sterling, the founder of the SAS, and James Goldsmith and Lord Lucan. And he was a prominent member of that bunch. And Actually, I've got a mate who said, when I told him all that on the night I found it, he said the most brilliant line. He said, "Well, it'd be easy to find your dad now. Just find Lord Lucan and you've got him." And there we are. Then had to make do with that. And and of course, these people weren't just gamblers. Not my natural dad. He seems to have really just been out for enjoying himself, without ever having done anything particularly personally unpleasant at all, I'm very glad to say. But he was just out for enjoying himself and making lots of money. The people in the circle of which he was very much a part, you couldn't say the same about them. And these people were asset strippers. They were people who, for example, merged all the companies that meant that the shipyard in Glasgow shut down in the first place. That had been the first thing that had turned me into a sort of someone who was cross about these things. Little did I know at the time I was watching it that the people surrounding my natural father were the people causing all this stuff. And so that certainly changed me, because how could it not? This was such an extraordinary event. And I then wrote to him. And it took him a long while to get back to me, but he did eventually, with a really kind message, and he didn't sort of try to claim that it wasn't him or anything like that. What he did say was that he had paid. They just had a very brief fling, it seems to me,
at Manchester University.
Yeah. He'd come down from Manchester University,
right.
and I think it happened in London,
right.
the event.
Right.
But he then went back to Manchester University, was contacted, he said, by Frances, who said, "I'm pregnant." And so they arranged that she would have a termination, which wasn't easy to organise back in those days, but he had the sort of resources to do that, or rather his father did. And that was the last he heard. And then about a year later, he was coming over to London and we met up. And it was so funny, because he was so brilliantly sort of the most beautifully Jewish, lovely man, just his demeanour. And I had no idea that I'd had any sort of Jewish heritage at all until I found all this out. And then Joe, his name is, and we met in this cafe, and the opening line, if you wrote it as a piece of dialogue, you'd go, "Oh, that's been made up." But the opening line, so he comes, this is the first that I'd ever heard from my mum or dad actually speaking to me personally. He said, "I've got a lot of meetings today. I'll be honest, this is the most awkward." And then he repeated the thing. He said, "Like I said, it was, all those years ago, all those decades ago, I paid her the money, and that's the last that I knew, and I thought that was it." And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, I'll tell you what, I'm back in touch with her family now, so if you like, I can ask for the money back that they clearly owe you." And he sort of went, And I said, "Oh, it was a better joke than that, wasn't it, Joe?" And he went, "Yeah, maybe." And when we sat down, and I thought, this is brilliant. He said, "Are we just going to do jokes at each other for the next couple of hours?" And we really, really got on. And it has disappointed me that we haven't been able to keep in touch since then, really. He's got very embarrassed about it, and he's very embarrassed that he hasn't been able to confess it to his kids. I think that's stuff now this book's come out. But
okay.
But, oh, God, but even, Neil, every bit of it is mad. So I find out that he's got two younger kids. Well, I mean, one of which Prince Andrew tried to go out with. There's an article I found by the mother of Koo Stark. The mother of Koo Stark writes that when Prince Andrew pursued Koo Stark, originally it was actually not Koo Stark that he was after. It was Koo Stark's best friend, who was my half sister. I know. I think I say in the book, I'm not sure how these things work, but I think that makes me eighth in line to the throne. And so it goes on. So he's got two younger offspring, one of which is a supermodel who was in the papers 3 years ago because she was going out with Liam from One Direction. Do you know what? Every time I tell these things, I think, oh, shut up, you're making this up. If I was sitting at home listening to this now, I'd think he's making this up. But honestly, it's true. It's so, I'm sort of, my half-sister was... And then there was I was alerted to an article in the Sun newspaper that said at this point, there was a whole load of tabloid articles along these lines, Lord Lucan link to Liam. So there was a series of articles about how Liam from One Direction was now linked to Lord Lucan because he was going out with the daughter of a man who played backgammon with Lord Lucan. And I thought, right, how strange. And I was reading through this article and it said that Joe, my natural father, it said that the supermodel is one of 5 kids that he has. And I thought, oh, yeah, well, they've got that wrong, haven't they? There's only 4. And then it mentioned the 4 kids. And then it said, and also recently it was revealed that comedian Mark Steele is also his illegitimate son. Wow. And then there was a picture of Lord Lucan, and then one of the supermodel, and then one of me. And I was like, if you had a really mad dream and you wake up in the morning and you say, I had this odd dream that I was in a newspaper and that there was a picture of Lord Lucan and then a supermodel and me. I mean, you'd book up a series of counselling sessions immediately, wouldn't you? But this really happened. And so on it goes. This is just one of a whole series of tales like this.
You kind of intimated that, it's a shame that you and he haven't really stayed in touch. How hard is that for you, but I guess also for your kids?
My son and daughter are brilliant with it. They find it hilarious, but they are not in any way.
Not One Direction fans.
Well, they're like me with music. My daughter is brilliantly obsessed with music in that way that her generation are. She'll play, a Dave or something, or Stormzy or something, and then she'll play Duke Ellington straight away and see no reason why the two don't go together. So she's very much like that. But yeah, she's not in any. No, they're not troubled by it. They find it hilarious. Occasionally they go, "Do you reckon he's going to leave us 20 million quid?" But that's which is quite legitimate.
Have you stopped reaching out?
No, I think I probably ought to write to him over the next few days and say, you said that you sort of were very nervous about your kids finding out. Well, there's an audio book coming out that might just puncture that somewhat, I'm afraid. Right. But I sort of, I hope he's all right with it. I really don't think I've been unkind to him at all. He was, for example, his closest friend, he says. And he told me this when we met, was Kerry Packer, who was the
Australian,
probably the richest man ever in Australia, I would guess, in real terms. So
he moved in some serious circles, didn't he, Mark?
He did. And I think politically that means that he did describe it as, I know that politically we come from different planets, but I think was quite sweet. But on a personal level, he really does seem like quite a laugh. And I think that I think that's always been his aim. My mother, on the other hand, I think is a much more tragic story. And this is one of the reasons why, and this has affected me. I don't think you would be human if it didn't affect you, whether or not it was your mother. the story of why my mother had happened to give me up. If you just look at it as a personal event, you won't understand it. But if you look at it as part of the times, it is extraordinary, because the times dictated that in between the mid-50s and early 70s, if you were a young, unmarried, pregnant woman, you were seen as a disgrace. And social workers, they were called moral welfare officers at the time, parents probably, society as a whole really dictated that the only thing you could do that was decent was to take your punishment, to give the baby away and forget about it. And so an estimated 500,000 women did this. They went to mother and baby homes, and if you hear about the conditions of these mother and baby homes, and you just sort of repeat it, if you just said, here are the conditions of a mother where women had to go and spend their labour time or spend their pregnancies, and you ask someone, when do you think that was? I think most people would guess about 1860, but it was right up until the early 1970s, and they were really introduced there pretty much as they were told they were there to be punished. The doctors would barely speak to them. They'd only speak to the mother. The attitude was, well, you've got yourself in trouble. What do you expect? They were made to work, scrubbing floors, that sort of thing, right up until the moment they gave birth. And then, as soon as they gave birth, the baby would be taken from them. And as soon as the adoptive parents came round and took them, then the people in the homes would say, right, the baby's gone now, you can go. And they were just given, told to get on the bus and go home and not think about it anymore and forget about it, and there's a good thing, and try to be a bit more careful in the future. And I don't think it would be possible to read any account of that and not be profoundly moved by it.
Ashley from Warwickshire, Mark, has said, please keep this conversation going on all afternoon. Mark is an absolute delight.
Oh, thank you very much, Ashley.
And Roy from Croydon said, hi, Nihal, listening to your show today, the most funny, interesting, dry, real guest for a long time. Mark Steele, love seeing you on TV, and it's my pleasure to learn more about you, top man. So many texts like this, my friend. If you needed your ego massaging today, it's happening. It's really, really happening here. Amazing listening to Mark Steele. I too was adopted into an East End family, initially deceived about adoption with a background of all the anger and violence that was such a part of life. Eventually found birth parents. My father is a lord, apparently, and I'm having trouble finding him. Could you ask Mark for details of this wonderful, efficient woman who helped him locate his mother?
Oh, yes, absolutely I will, yeah.
And lastly, so agree with him regarding nature versus nurture. It takes one a lifetime to become who you always were, without the layers of inadequacy and self-loathing that results from trying to live by adopted parents' norms.
Oh, right. Well, that sounds like it's gone a little bit haywire, doesn't it?
Indeed.
I think in the end you come to terms with it. I mean, there's nothing. I've got nothing. I'm absolutely not got anything against my adoptive parents for not being different people, for not having an interest in music and stuff. And they were, my dad did take me to the cricket, albeit so that he could get completely drunk and insult some of the world's greatest cricketers
and invade the dressing rooms. Yes, he certainly. Yeah, and look, we haven't. To be honest, there's so much about your adopted parents in this audiobook as well that we haven't really touched upon, and we don't have time to touch upon, but it is such a fascinating listen, Mark, and I think a lot of people will be going to search out. Interestingly, someone's just tweeted me that it isn't available on Audible.
Oh, it is from tomorrow, I believe.
From tomorrow.
Yeah,
My apologies. I put
okay.
Now, but it's from tomorrow. Who Do I Think I Am by Mark Steele is available on Audible. No regrets, I'm guessing, from going through this?
Oh, no, not regrets really, but I think it would have been nice if I'd sort of pursued it earlier. Really, I think it's the only thing that I could say that is sort of any value whatsoever. If it is just don't tell lies, don't keep secrets that are a sort of lies. They never help. And everything about this story that is that is bad is a result of secrecy.
Right.
Everything that is good is a result of honesty. And that's why I think I think it would be great for if my natural father sort of told his kids about it, because they'll find out eventually. Maybe they're listening to it right now. That would be something. You get a text from one of them.
That would be very, very interesting. The kids at my son's school still play British Bulldog. For 1 week it was banned. They came back under the name called Duck Duck Goose. The following week, Double Goose was banned. Then it was replaced by Sharky Sharky. You will approve of that rebellious spirit. I know, Mark Steele. Bring back British Bulldog. Andy from Western Dat. Mark, what a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Noel. It's been brilliant to be here. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Remember to subscribe so you never miss an episode of Headliners. And while you're there, why not check this?
Must watch from BBC Radio 5 Live.
It does feel quite unhinged.
The gag count is so high and it rewards a binge viewing.
It's like they forgot how to make a TV show.
I would happily watch a show just about those guys.
Just this sheer experimentation and creativity is something that I just really admire.
I feel like we should do a whole hour just about whether you should let your dog lick your mouth.
I hated this documentary.
No. Richard Armitage and Hannah John Kamen, welcome to Must Watch.
Hi. Was that I was doing as acting?
Joey Essex.
What's happening, bro?
The record of people meeting in reality TV shows and staying together, you'll probably be aware, is not a great one.
Yeah, well, she's sitting right outside.
My agent phoned and said, look, they want to attach you to this project. And I said, well, what's it about? She said, it's a policeman that gets killed. Oh, here we go. Here we go again.
Hello, Rhiannon.
Hello, happy Love Island Day.
And has Craig David ever been mistaken for you before?
The first time I saw him on TV, I thought, what am I doing on TV? Like, that's how much he looked like me.
Sue in Brighton.
Is she saying Friends?
Yes, she's saying Friends. Is it a must-watch?
For a special category of you have to watch it because you want to lose your mind, I'm going to say yes.
That's Must Watch, the only TV review podcast you'll ever need. Available right now from BBC Sounds.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.